We are going to continue here, moving through the Psalms. We are on Psalm 69, Save Me, O God. To the choir master, according to the lilies of David. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mire, where there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters, and the flood sweeps over me. I am weary with my crying out. My throat is parched. My eyes grow dim with waiting for my God. More in number than the hairs of my head are those who hate me without a cause. Mighty are those who would destroy me, those who attack me with lies. What I did not steal must I now restore. O God, you know my folly. The wrongs I have done are not hidden from you. Let not those who hope in you be put to shame through me, O Lord, God of hosts. Let not those who seek you be brought to dishonor through me, O God of Israel. For it is your sake that I have borne reproach, that dishonor has covered my face. I have become a stranger to my brothers, an alien to my mother's sons. For zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me. When I wept and humbled my soul with fasting, it became my reproach. When I made sackcloth my clothing, I became a byword to them. I am the talk of those who sit in the gate, and the drunkards make songs about me. But as for me, my prayer is to you, O Lord, at an acceptable time, O God. In the abundance of your steadfast love, answer me in your saving faithfulness. Deliver me from sinking in the mire. Let me be delivered from my enemies, and from the deep waters. Let not the flood sweep over me, or the deep swallow me up, or the pit close its mouth over me. Answer me, O God, for your steadfast love is good. According to your abundant mercy, turn to me. Hide not your face from your servant, for I am in distress. Make haste to answer me. Draw near to my soul, redeem me. Ransom me because of my enemies. You know my reproach, and my shame and my dishonor. My foes are all known to you. Reproaches have broken my heart, so that I am in despair. I looked for pity, but there was none, and for comforts, but I found none. They gave me poison for food, and for my thirst they gave me sour wine to drink. Let their own table before them become a snare, and when they are at peace, let it become a trap. Let their eyes be darkened, so that they cannot see, and make their loins tremble continually. Pour out your indignation upon them, and let your burning anger overtake them. May their camp be in desolation. Let no one dwell in their tents, for they persecute him who have struck down, and they recount the pain of those you have wounded. Add to them punishment upon punishment. May they have no acquittal from you. Let them be blotted out of the book of living. Let them not be enrolled among the righteous. I am afflicted and in pain. Let your salvation, O God, set me on high. I will praise the name of God with a song. I will magnify him with thanksgiving. This will please the Lord more than an ox or a bull with horns and hooves. When the humble see it, they will be glad. You who seek God, let your hearts revive. For the Lord hears the needy, and does not despise his own people who are prisoners. Let heaven and earth praise him, the seas and everything that moves in them. For God will save Zion, and build up the cities of Judah, and people shall dwell there and possess it. The offspring of his servants shall inherit it, and those who love his name shall dwell in it. So, one of the longest psalms that we've had thus far. So what can we make of it? Again, like many before this, we hear David in this state of anguish. Of course, the title of the psalm is Save Me, O God. Now, what exactly does he need to be saved from? Well, of course, we saw in this psalm, as we do in many others, that he requires saving from his enemy. He requires saving from himself. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. And so this water, it's interesting, this language, because it's not save me, O God, for the enemies have come up to my neck. It's save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. It's a different way, it's more generalized. It's not a specific thing, but rather it is a word, a symbol. Again, we think of water as something that symbolizes chaos, sort of disorder. If we consider a fluid as something that is not easily held, and something that is not easily held is something that's not easily, we can say controlled, but that isn't quite right. To hold something, I think, is to, in some sense, understand it. To hold an idea within the mind, I think, is to commit it to memory. And in a case, to commit it to understanding. And certainly water is something that makes this holding difficult to do. Because just as in our everyday experience, if we place our hand under the faucet, it's almost impossible to retain any of that volume, even if we form the shape of the hand that's most conducive to holding water. We will in no way retain the any useful amount of substance in this way. Now when David says, "Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck," we see something that potentially threatens him. It threatens to change him. It threatens to bring chaos to his intelligible world. For we understand in this first verse that the body is completely submerged. Now we can use the sort of the symbolism of Matthew Pageau, and if we consider the body and the mind as two separate categories, symbolic categories, where the mind is more the heavenly principle and the body is the earthly. The heavenly principle, we can also say, is the abstract principle, and the earthly principle is the concrete principle. And when I say concrete principle, I say this is sort of perhaps a thing of nature. I think of nature that is waiting for the mind of meaning to permeate it and to raise it from its material condition into something that is useful for us. Now, in this way, in this interpretation, I think what can be seen is the disorder that is brought to the concrete principle. and it has come up to his neck. The waters have come up to David's neck, which now it means that it now threatens, it's on the precipice of submerging the mind, or the heavenly principle, or the abstract principle. And now we can imagine that if we reduce the abstract principle, or to dissolve it in such a state of nature that the concrete principle has not received this abstract principle, this can be devastating. This is the human being truly lost in the wilderness. Sort of a child that is, from birth perhaps, raised in the wilderness by wild beasts. What do they know of abstraction? What did they know of meaning and purpose? How long will it take them to move to a place of understanding that they'll actually resemble something that we would consider to be a civilized human being? It would take generations. It would take generations of savage people met each other and procreated. Of course, their offspring would be imbued with a certain sense of love, but the depth of understanding would be severely limited. And so, without the material safeguard, let's say, or the proper balance between the abstract and the concrete, I think we can almost imagine David in this case. In other Psalms, he was relegated to a cave, running from his enemies. Of course, away from civilization, away from the city, away from the umbrella of agriculture that would sustain the body, outside of the walls of the city that provide protection. And the city, in this way, or civilization in this way, is this interplay between the heavenly principle, or the abstract principle, the thing that imbues meaning into the earthly material to raise it up into something like a city that provides us for nourishment for the body, right? A city exists primarily, it is allowed to exist because of the surrounding agriculture. Food is then funneled into the city. People congregate together, and they live their lives, hopefully directed in a good purpose, in a good way. And so, again, to return to this, hopefully this is at least somewhat coherent, but to return to this thought, we see David submerged up to his neck in water. Verse 2, I sink in the deep mire where there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters, and the flood sweeps over me. And so I think we have here similar imagery. I sink into the deep mire, this sort of, I get a sense of loneliness from it. It's an absence of love. And there is no foothold. There's nothing to make sense of what to do once he is sunk down into this pit. Once he's come into the deep waters. There's no grounding. Again, there's no understanding. And without this grounding, without understanding, without the foothold, one cannot take the step to move forward. And of course, this step to move forward, we step towards what is highest, the highest good, towards God. And in doing so, we improve our heavenly principle, the abstract principle of mind, to such a degree that it directs our attention to the earthly principle and to raise it in such a way that provides humanity with the greatest degree of meaning and purpose possible. Okay? And this includes beauty, I think. It has to. It has to include love. Of course, not all societies are the same. The world is an interesting place. There have been civilizations that have risen and have fallen, civilizations that have gone through their golden age and have declined into sort of this obscurity and unfortunate demise. But all the while, the human being, I think, remains capable of understanding the highest goods and the most profound ways to be. But the thing about this psalm, and I know we were only 2 verses in, this is a fundamental thing of man. Because, in my mind, when I think of a civilization that is in decline, I think of let's say the sort of the average or the mean consciousness. I think it undergoes this sort of thing. The waters come up to the neck of many people in that society. They sink into the deep mire. They cannot find a foothold. They find themselves in deep water. A flood sweeps over them. And in this way, what can we say of meaning? What can we say of love in this type of society? It's a decline. It's a moving away from the good, from the vibrancy of life. It's an unfortunate condition of man. But it's one, no doubt, that we have experienced over and over and over again. And I think we experience this just as much as we do on the civilizational level as we do on the individual level, which is why I like these sort of, I like the Psalms. I like the biblical teaching because it scales at all levels. It's a pattern that's easy to recognize. It's very simple, but very profound. I am weary with my crying out. My throat is parched. My eyes grow dim with waiting for my God. And so this is verse 3. And I think it's an interesting one. And I'm not sure exactly what to make of it. You know, I always come into conflict with David at some point. And I wonder about this word, waiting for my God. I can understand the weariness with crying out, the throat being parched, the sort of continual reaching and trying to find that foothold, just trying to find dry land, that place of stability where you can say, okay, this is the direction I need to go in. This is how I'm going to lead my people as a leader. Of course, he was a king in his day, a king of Israel. But then it says, my eyes grow dim with waiting for my God. And the reason I have trouble with this waiting, because it's as if, let me say this, we understand that he is trying. Again, he is trying to find this dry land, because when he says, I am weary with my crying out, and my throat is parched, it's this continual asking. I'm sort of covering ground that I've already walked over, but I think it's important to hammer this point home. He has tried. And then he says, my eyes grow dim. And in this sense, this is how one loses their faith. It's not losing faith into something that they don't understand. This is the very process of losing understanding, full stop. Losing the intelligibility of the world. losing your grounding. This is a person that sinks into a very deep depression. They don't know, they can't find the meaning in life. Again, they can't move their foot forward. They don't know what direction they should take. My eyes grow dim with waiting for my God. And the reason I struggle with waiting is because he's not waiting. He's trying. And I think that this might be a cop-out interpretation here, but I believe that if you try rightly, then you will receive this sort of divine grace, right? This alleviation of the suffering, of this sort of depression, of sinking into the deep mire, if you try rightly. Now, of course, we can give in to this sinking feeling. The eyes might very well grow dim, but it shall not be from waiting that this is to happen, even if it means the death of the mind or of the individual. We always have to keep trying in life. We have one life to live, so we have to live it. Now, this is sort of a harsh critique of David. Certainly if I was in his position, I can only imagine being in his position in the ancient world and having to deal with all the nonsense that he had to deal with. I'd probably be in a much worse condition in terms of my mental status than he is. More in number than the hairs of my head are those who hate me without cause. Mighty are those who would destroy me, those who attack me with lies. What I did not steal, must I now restore? So this is verse 4. And so now he returns to the enemies. And again, in biblical cosmology, you don't necessarily have to focus on this sort of idea of an external enemy, the enemy at the gates. You can think of it as an enemy. Expand that word as much as you can. Fill it with as much meaning as you can. Because the enemy might not be another individual. It could be the self. It could be the lack of intelligibility, the lack of firm pillar, again, to orient yourself to where and what you should be doing. This is, in a sense, a type of enemy because it invades the mind and it prevents one from proper action. Certainly we can also do the obvious analogy, which is the external enemy, the external individual. And we understand that he had many in his day. The interesting line here, what I did not steal, must I now restore? So let's break down that statement. Now, to steal something is to take something that is not earned. To take something under the umbrella of deception. What I did not steal, must I now restore? Now, in the case of stealing something, in order to return something to its rightful place, it would be then to restore it. But if something was not stolen, if something was gained properly, if something was earned rightly, then it should not be restored. Now, this interpretation can be off. I'm not entirely sure, but this is sort of where my mind is going. O God, you know my folly. The wrongs I have done are not hidden from you. Let not those who hope in you be put to shame through me, O Lord God of hosts. Let not those who seek you be brought to dishonor through me, O God of Israel. And so we see here a sense of humility. That is to say, I think he recognizes what is happening to him, whether it be because of his enemies or because of his own personal failures. The sort of falling into the deep mire, whatever its reason. Who cares what the reason is? The point is that he is falling into the mire. He is losing his understanding, his intelligibility, his foothold. And he's saying, I'm sorry, essentially, to God. Don't let others try and find you through me, because I'm falling into the deep. I'm struggling here. I need your help. For it is for your sake that I have borne reproach. Now this is quite the interesting verse, so I'm going to repeat it here. This is verse 7. For it is for your sake that I have borne reproach, that dishonor has covered my face. And what I think this means here is that for the sake of this orienting being, okay, this understanding of the way of being, the highest good, the most profound love, the divine spirit, it is for your sake that I have borne reproach. I have found disdain in myself. I'm disappointed. I rebuke myself. I admonish myself. I scold myself for the being that I have found myself to inhabit, because I should know better, because I know you, I know the highest. That dishonor has covered my face. I have become a stranger to my brothers, an alien to my mother's sons. And so again, this continues the imagery here. For if you are going to become a stranger to a brother or a close friend, you no longer have that connection with them. Your behavior is in such a way that you're unable to move into this I want to say dialogos, like this sort of this way of conversation that brings people into a new way of understanding, which I think inherently binds them closer together. But it can also be simpler than that. It could just be simply being present, paying attention to those that you love. And he's saying here, he's become a stranger to it. What a terrible thing. When I reflect on this, I reflect on all the instances in my life where this has happened. I've gone through a long stretch of my life where I think that this was the case for me. And I struggled a lot with it. So I really understand what he's saying here. I really understand what it means to not quite connect with those that you should be connecting with, because they're all that you've got. Where are you going to have love if it's not from your family or from your closest friends? And if for some reason you can't just keep it together enough to accept that love or to build it up, that's tough. It is very tough. For zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me. This is another great piece of wisdom, I think, here. He's saying for this zeal, this passion for your house, for your habitation, for your, again, the house is this place of, this home that one can rest in, that one can go to. They have all of their belongings there. It means something to them. It is this place of profound security and comfort, I could say. It's a place of protection from the external environment. Keeps us safe from the elements. And now if we imagine the highest house, right? God's house. The most beautiful house. The house with all the most beautiful paintings in the world. The best music that's playing. The best food in the refrigerator. The best people that live in it. The best traditions. The best unifying events around the dinner table with those that you love. This is the house. This is the true house that we want. To be with family, with those that we love, within this house, within God's house. And so this zeal has consumed him for this house. And so now I think we're beginning to see this sort of resurgence, this coming back up out from the deep mire. And he says, the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me. Because it is the disappointment and the disapproval of the goodness and of the divine that the true believer takes upon themselves if it comes from another. And the reason that that happens, I believe, is because the faithful person, the person that believes in the highest good, again, that house, that image of the house, the best house, not the house that's, filled with prostitutes and the house that has rotten wood and it's not taken care of, and it's it doesn't protect you from the external environment. There are holes in the wall, whatever. The house that, again, I'm thinking about the tradition around that table, the family that comes together, that love that is created within that house and that environment. Again, the beauty of the house is there too. So I'm thinking of this image. And if somebody is going to reproach that image, I'm going to take it on myself, and I'm going to reflect, and I'm going to say, okay, now why would it be that another person would have a problem with this image? Because this image in my mind is the highest image that I can think of. This is God's house. So is there something wrong with my faith? Is there something wrong with my reason? With my philosophy? Then I need to revisit. Is there a higher place yet I still need to go? Or is it a problem with the individual, perhaps, that doesn't value the same things that I value? But this is not the approach of David, because David is taking on the reproach onto himself. And so it is, I think, truly the case that he is asking, what can I do to improve my image of the divine house? When I wept and humbled my soul with fasting, it became my reproach. When I made sackcloth my clothing, I became a byword to them. I am the talk of those who sit in the gate, and the drunkards make song about me. And so we see this sinking of reputation. We see the opinion of him, even though he is trying to move towards it, right? He goes on to this fast, and then he is reproached for it. He's sort of belittled because of it. When I wept and humbled my soul with fasting, it became my reproach. Now another interpretation, of course, is when he underwent this fasting, all of a sudden he shed the sort of, I'm thinking of the image of a plaque that built up on the teeth over time, and you sort of go to the dentist and they chip it away, and then, you leave and your teeth feel all clean, and you feel all the new grooves in your teeth that you haven't felt in a while because it's so clean. I think this is much like this fasting process for him. Once he underwent this humbling, he saw how dirty those teeth were. And he saw his reputation among the people in the city. When I made sackcloth my clothing, I became a byword to them. I am the talk of those who sit in the gate, and the drunkards who make songs about me. But as for me, my prayer is to you, O Lord, at an acceptable time, O God, in the abundance of your steadfast love. Answer me in your saving faithfulness. Deliver me from the sinking mire. Let me be delivered from my enemies and from the deep waters. Let not the flood sweep over me, or the deep swallow me up, or the pit close its mouth over me. Answer me, O God, for your steadfast love is good. According to your abundant mercy, turn to me. Hide not your face from your servant, for I am in distress. Make haste to answer me. Draw near to my soul, redeem me, ransom me because of my enemies. Again, enemies, personal and foreign. But again, as we have said in previous episodes, we see this undulation, this reveal of wisdom, and then the return to praise. This reveal of wisdom, and then the return to praise. So it's this back and forth with the divine goodness that exists within our minds. And we have to forget for a moment about the broader implications of what this might mean for the objective, what we consider to be the sort of objective reality of actually having there being a divine mind outside of the universe that set this whole thing in motion. At the very least, we can start here, within our mind. And just as in the case of those who interpret this sort of thing completely literally, as compared to completely sort of symbolically, it still leads one down the same path, in essence. Now, I'm not saying that I reject one and approve of the other. I lean towards the symbolic more. There's nothing in my mind in my reason that says there cannot be a divine mind that set the universe in motion. But I reserve that sort of judgment for the divine mind. Right now, I am satisfied with what I've been given. That is, I've been thrust into this life, this reality, and I know that I've been given the mechanism, the machine, the engine to perceive of what is higher than myself. And that is proof enough for me to pursue it. Forget about everything else. Forget about the political arguments, the state of the institution of the church. Forget it. It's about the love, and it's about the fulfillment of life, the purpose of my life. You know my reproach, and my shame and my dishonor. My foes are all known to you. Reproaches have broken my heart, so that I am in despair. I looked for pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. They gave me poison for food, and for my thirst they gave me sour wine to drink. So another wise set of verses here. These are 3 verses, 19, 20, and 21. So he's saying to the divine goodness, I know that you know my reproach, I know that you know this sense of disapproval and disappointment. I know that you know this admonition and my shame and my dishonor. My foes are all known to you. Now these reproaches, this disapproval, this disappointment, this admonition, this rebuke, and this shame, and this dishonor, has broken my heart. And I'm in despair because of it. And I looked for pity, I looked for pity, but there was none. And for comforters, I looked for that too, but I found none. They gave me poison for food, and for my thirst they gave me sour wine to drink. And so I think there's two things that can be said about this. On one hand, we see here this reliance, this searching for pity and relief of one's own personal reproach, the shame and dishonor. In a sense, this is a personal problem, and it can involve others to help come to a solution. But the individual, again, it needs to be involved in that process, I think. It needs to heal. It needs to be involved in its own healing. There are no comforters that can take away that type of shame and dishonor. The shame and dishonor almost, in a sense, has to get worse so that one can recognize it and really point the finger on it. Stick the finger straight into the wound. Say, this is it. This is my shame. What am I going to do about it now? Now this over-reliance on searching for the pity or searching for the comfort will lead, or can lead, it doesn't necessarily have to be of another individual. Looking for pity within the self, within the ego, looking for a comfort again within the ego, or within fast food or drugs or whatever. It's all the same thing. But there was none, and I found none. They gave me poison for food, and for my thirst they gave me sour wine to drink. And so the very thing that we need to sustain ourselves, the very thing that we need to heal, we cannot find it in pity, we cannot find it in comfort. To heal this shame and dishonor, we cannot find it. We cannot hold these things or pursue these things to satisfy and to resolve this reproach. I love those 3 verses. Let their own table before them become a snare, and when they are at peace, let it become a trap. Now this is an interesting verse. This is verse 22. And it's interesting because, in my mind, a snare and a trap can be considered the same thing, in a sense, because a snare is a trap. Perhaps it's a type of trap. But given the context here, I think we can say a few things about it. Let their own table before them become a snare. And so what does it mean, this table before them? As this table sits before me. It's not the material meaning. I don't think it means the wood or its physical character, how it appears to us visually. I don't think that that's what this verse is referring to. Let their own table before them. This is a symbol. The symbol of the table is the thing that brings people together. And this bringing of people together, it facilitates love and a sense of connectedness, unity. To share a meal with somebody is an intimate thing to do. You are letting your guard down. You're saying, I trust this person. In the modern day, this sort of thing is still certainly a practice in our culture, to share meals with one another. But I think in the absence of the struggles of the ancient world, perhaps the scarcity of food, or the immediacy of our close personal relationships, today we have much more to separate us from this tradition than they did back then. And so the only reason I say that is to sort of recognize what this might have meant symbolically for the authors that wrote this. Let their own table before them become a snare. And from my point of view, this snare serves to catch one. It is to bind them in such a way that they are not to escape it easily. At least it impedes their further motion, their further action. And I think this impediment is important to the meaning of this verse. And that is to say, if there's some sort of impediment to their participation at the table, then this process, this coming together, this unity, this family formation will be disrupted. And when they are at peace, let it become a trap. And so, when they least expect it, when they feel most comfortable with their lives and what they have done, let it then become a trap. Because in the sense of the trap, they are unaware. Now there's a footnote here. In Hebrew, a slight revocalization yields a snare and a retribution and a trap. And this, of course, implies sort of a punishment for a wrong that has been done. Let their eyes be darkened so they cannot see, and make their loins tremble continuously. Now keep in mind, this is the appeal of David to God. Sort of this appeal to punish this evil, or this perceived evil force. Whether it be the enemy, the external person, or the more subtle deception that can come from within, that of course is not entirely separated from the outside world and reality, but this sort of pathology that comes in within the self and within the ego, I think it can twist itself in such a way to pervert the very relationship of the self to the external environment. Rather than being this harmonious whole, it becomes this fractured and segmented existence. And so these are the two things that, in my mind, I imagine this sort of appeal to God for. Either let the individuals be blinded so they cannot see, or in general, the deceptive forces of nature, let this be blinded so it cannot confuse us, it cannot disorient us, it cannot draw us away from concentration. And make their loins tremble continually. And I think this has to do with the prevention of the continuation of a particular way of being or a particular spirit of nature. Of course, this is very symbolically rich language here, because the loins, it refers to a sexual organ. It refers to the sort of the act. It can refer to the act of procreation. The loins being, again, a symbol of the sexual potential for producing offspring. And so for the loins to tremble, when something trembles, it is uncertain. It has lost its faith in a certain sense. And this uncertainty leads to a buildup of all the familiar emotions. This anxiety, this, again, uncertainty, this instability that's away from the pillar of stability. And you can imagine this very natural phenomenon if it captures something as fundamental as the loins, as fundamental as the understanding of the importance of rearing children and how to bring them up. You can understand the downstream consequences that this might have on the enemy of the author of this psalm, the enemies of David, perhaps. May their camp be in desolation. Let no one dwell in their tents. For they persecute him whom you have struck down, and they recount the pain of those you have wounded. So we have this continued language here of the destruction of the enemy, the destruction of this disharmonious force. Now verse 26. I'm not quite sure I understand this. It reads, "For they persecute him whom you have struck down, and they recount the pain of those you have wounded." And so I understand that second part. They recount the pain of those you have wounded. Because if they wrote, this is my interpretation, if they recount, I think it's referring to they being sort of this, again, the negative force, the disharmony, this confusion, the distraction, the external person that wishes us bodily harm, or again, an emotional disequilibrium or confusion. If they recount that pain, I think they're contributing value to that pain. And it's within that value, I think, that they are sort of saying that, almost like, we experience these days with this wokeness revolution, it is more about the ego and the self, the individual suffering and the pain that is above the truth itself. And so if one is to say they recount the pain of those you have wounded, what they are saying is we should value the pain of the guilty more than we should value the judgment of the truth. And of course, an enemy that does this and brings us into a society will lead to the destruction of the society. Because you need truth. You need absolute justice. But what I don't understand is the first line, "For they persecute him whom you have struck down." Now this striking down, now I'm presuming that this is God is striking somebody down. He's performing his divine judgment against some violation of law. And we can imagine any number of illustrations of what this might be. Some violations are, I think, loftier than others. Some violations may be specific to a particular context and a particular age, given the structure of society. But nonetheless, we see somebody that is judged and is struck down in their action, their behavior, their thought, their being, whatever. And he says, the author says, for they persecute him whom you have struck down. Now, in my mind, I think, well, if they're persecuting this person that God has struck down, is this not a good thing? It seems to be in a similar line. Because this persecution is to subject somebody to hostility and ill treatment. However, the word itself may be a little bit more nuanced than that. This persecution, it may apply to something that's superficial. It may not be applying to the truth. And it may be the case that this persecution goes beyond judgment. That is, God may say, the divine force may say, this person has done wrong, and they must pay the price for it. But once that price has been paid, they are free from that imprisonment, let's say, whatever form that might take. But in the case of persecution, I can imagine an interpretation that might suggest within this persecution that the judgment never ends. The wrong that was committed and the price that was paid is never enough. And in this sense, it is wrong. Verse 27, add to them punishment upon punishment. May they have no acquittal from you. But then again, this is sort of a reverse of that wisdom that we saw earlier. Because if it's punishment upon punishment, either the author wants continual punishment, like the persecution, or the continual punishment is for continual wrongs. And that doesn't seem to be quite clear, unless I'm missing something entirely here. May they have no acquittal from you. Let them be blotted out of the book of the living. Let them not be enrolled among the righteous. So I'm not entirely sure what to make of those last few verses. Of course, on one hand, I understand where they're coming from, where the author is coming from. That the enemy, the true enemy, is not just the enemy of the self, it is the enemy of truth. Because the self, in this context, we have to remember, is oriented towards the self. As imperfect as the human expression of this may be, we have to keep in mind that the authors and the Christians, or the Jews, they feel themselves in this direction, towards the higher, towards the good. They sacrifice parts of the self in order to do this. And so their critique here against their enemy is a critique against those who are not oriented towards the highest, towards the good, towards the truth, towards the beautiful. And so, as a result, you see all this sort of negative stuff. Add to them punishment upon punishment. May they have no acquittal from you. Let them be blotted out of the book of the living. Let them not be enrolled among the righteous. But it goes back to that one verse, verse 26. For they persecute him whom you have struck down. And they recount the pain of those you have wounded. Perhaps there is something in my interpretation there that I quite don't understand, but it seems a bit like a contradiction. Now, there's a way that it can work. I think I already talked about that, but for now I think I'll just have to leave it there. If we zoom out a little bit more away from that minor conflict, that minor detail, I think there is solid truth to be had here about the implications that I've just described. Verse 29. But I am afflicted and in pain. Let your salvation, O God, set me on high. And so now we return essentially to the enemy within. Because now the individual is saying, I'm afflicted. I spent the last how many ever verses saying of what should be done to the enemy. But then verse 29, I am afflicted and in pain. And who's to say that this affliction and this pain is not because there is a misalignment in the orientation of the self towards the highest? And in that sense, if the individual is not oriented towards the highest in the proper manner, they result in affliction and pain. The result is affliction and pain. Which means they are, in a sense, the enemy. There's two sides of that self. One is the understanding of this affliction and pain, and the other is the arbiter or the facilitator of the behavior that led to the affliction and the pain in the first place. And so it's an interesting struggle to deal with. This is a very human struggle. Let your salvation, O God, set me on high. I will praise the name of God with a song. I will magnify him with thanksgiving. This will please the Lord more than an ox or a bull with horns and hoofs. When the humble see it, they will be glad. You who seek God, let your hearts revive. For the Lord's heart hears the needy, and does not despise his own people who are prisoners. And so, like in many other psalms here, we see this play, this give and take, this back and forth, which is a recognition of something, an illumination of the truth, and then, or a recognition of where one has gone wrong, which I think is the case in this specific example, in the previous case of the recognition of the affliction and the suffering, and then the direct, and then the subsequent response after this recognition is to pray, is to praise, say, I will sing songs to the highest, with whatever my mind can formulate the highest to be, I will sing a song to that. I would devote myself to it. Because I am afflicted and I am in pain, and I need to find a reason why this is happening. Let heaven and earth praise him, the seas and everything that moves in them, for God will save Zion and build up the cities of Judah, and people shall dwell there and possess it. The offspring of his servants shall inherit it, and those who love his name shall dwell in it. Psalm 70. O Lord, do not delay. To the choir master of David for the memorial offering. Make haste, O God, to deliver me. O Lord, make haste to help me. Let them be put to shame and confusion who seek my life. Let them be turned back and brought to dishonor, who delight in my hurt. Let them turn back because of their shame, who say, Aha, aha. May all those who seek you rejoice and be glad in you. May those who love your salvation say evermore, God is great. But I am poor and needy. Hasten to me, O God. You are my help and my deliverer. O Lord, do not delay. So this is a fairly straightforward psalm here. Similar themes to what we've seen before. It's the recognition of enemies that wish to do one harm. I'm not quite sure what to make of the make haste, because it's it seems to imply to me not enough responsibility on the individual front. The individual in this case, I feel like, is saying, all right, hurry up. I need to get this figured out. On one hand, it's good because there is urgency that they want this good and this salvation for themselves. But I think this can quickly turn into a sort of dependency, a false understanding of what the divine nature is. And rather than understand that in order to accept the responsibility that will embolden the mind, enlighten it, they will instead turn to something more of a smothering mother type figure that gives one everything and anything that one wants. And the result of that is the avoiding of suffering and the lack of confrontation of deep existential and personal struggles. And of course, if this goes on long enough, then nothing gets changed. Nothing is solved. It's just a superficial existence. But anyway, I digress. I don't want to judge too harshly here, but there's not much to say about this psalm. It's something that we've seen before. It's, again, another give and take. It's the recognition, hey, I want the salvation, I want it now, I want it quick. And then it's the going back to praising. Because we definitely have to have it after saying something like that. You have to say, hey, I want this to hurry up. You're going to have to immediately after that go into praise. Psalm 71. Forsake me not when my strength is spent. In you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness deliver me and rescue me. Incline your ear to me and save me. Be to me a rock of refuge, to which I may continually come. You have given the command to save me. You are my rock and my fortress. Rescue me, O my God, from the hand of the wicked, from the grasp of the unjust and the cruel man. For you, O Lord, are my hope, my trust, O Lord, from my youth. Upon you I have leaned from before my birth. You are he who took me from my mother's womb. My praise is continually of you. I have been as a portent to many, but you are my strong refuge. My mouth is filled with your praise, and with your glory all the day. Do not cast me off in the time of old age. Forsake me not when my strength is spent. For my enemies speak concerning me. Those who watch for my life consult together and say, God has forsaken him. Pursue and seize him, for there is none to deliver him. O God, be not far from me. O my God, make haste to help me. May my accusers be put to shame and consumed. With scorn and disgrace may they be covered, who seek my hurt. But I will hope continually, and I will praise you yet more and more. My mouth will tell you of your righteous acts, of your deeds of salvation all the day, for their number is past my knowledge. With the mighty deeds of the Lord God I will come. I will remind them of your righteousness, yours alone. O God, from my youth you have taught me, and I still proclaim your wondrous deeds. So even to old age and gray hairs, O God, do not forsake me, until I proclaim your might to another generation, your power to all those to come. Your righteousness, O God, reaches the high heavens. You who have done great things, O God, who is like you? You who have made me see many troubles and calamities will revive me again. From the depths of the earth, you will bring me up again. You will increase my greatness and comfort me again. I will also praise you with the harp of your faithfulness, O my God. I will sing praises to you with the lyre, O Holy One of Israel. My lips will shout for joy when I sing praises to you, my soul also, which you have redeemed, and my tongue will talk of righteous help all the day long. For they have been put to shame and disappointment, who sought to do me hurt. So just like with many psalms, I think we need to begin with the title. The title just sort of sets everything in motion. It gives us a place to start from this sort of starting place of nothingness. It is the blink of intelligibility. And so what is this blink? It's forsake me not when my strength is spent. Let's just dwell on this for a moment. What can this mean? Forsake me not when my strength is spent. I think we all understand what it means to have our strength be spent, both physically and mentally. Obviously, we can be on our feet all day for work, come home and physically be exhausted. We can also go to work, be there all day, perform the duties that we have to perform, and then just be utterly mentally exhausted. And there's two forms of strength that we see emerge from this. We have the strength of the cognition, and we have the strength of the body. Because we have the ability to perceive of the pains of the body. There are no shortage of receptors and ways for us to understand the state of the body. If we have a sore muscle, it is far away from our conscious mind, and yet we understand its pain. We understand its suffering. And just in this way, we have the strength of the mind. Not the strength of the mind is a different level of complexity here, because it is part of this integrated whole. And I think that this integrated whole into this sort of unity towards this self has its own agency. Of course, who would say that the self doesn't have agency? But just as the body has its own form of agency, the self has a higher form of agency. Now its strength, I think, is elevated relative to that of the body. But here we have heaven and earth. Earth is this sort of unintelligible place for man to bring the light and intelligibility into from the heavens, from the heavenly principle. And man lies at this intersection between the two. And if we zoom in to the individual, if we zoom in to a full-length mirror and we see ourselves in it, we see the conscious mind, we see the body, and again we see these two principles, heaven and earth, between the conscious mind and the physical body. And so we are burdened by seemingly two systems, potentially. Two systems that demonstrate strength in their own way, again, an integrated whole. But I say that just to give it perspective of what it might mean for a strength to be spent. And to return to a deeper analogy, to come home from work, perhaps to be confronted by an adversity that has challenged us to the point of fatigue. At the end of that day, that challenge, if unsolved, remains with us, and it steals our strength to no end. And how do we reconcile with this? What do we do? Who do we appeal to solve it? To figure out this suffering? And I think, again, it has to do with the orientation of the self to the highest. And this is where the forsake me not bit of it comes in. Because certainly I feel forsaken when I'm completely thrown out of my understanding, my grounding in life and in society and culture. When that's thrown off by a particular challenge, I feel off. I feel adverse. I feel ill. I feel ungrounded. I feel forsaken. So Psalm 71, forsake me not when my earth is spent. This is what we should enter into it. This is the mind that we should enter into the psalm with. In you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness deliver me and rescue me. Incline your ear to me and save me. And so this is just what I was talking about. We understand exactly now why the author of this psalm is going to be taking refuge in God. He's taking refuge to the higher form of unity. The higher form of unity, again, is something that the sort of higher form, in terms of this heaven and earth scenario, is this appeal to the thing that is to the next level of consciousness, of heavenly divine authority that one could then bring down into the world and enlighten everything else around it. And so you take refuge in that, or you take refuge in the highest form of that, so that it may come down through you. So it gives you a stable pillar. Incline your ear to me and save me. We've seen this symbolism before, this inclination of the ear, which of course is, I think, a symbol of attention. If the divine authority attends to you, and you have that divine spirit flow through you, you will be saved. You'll be saved from all of the previous psalms that involved this sort of suffering against enemies and all this sort of thing. Be to me a rock of refuge. And then this is the important part here. This crescendo, this rising musical score I can imagine in my mind. Be to me a rock and refuge to which I may continually come. Now, how fundamental is that? Because I think part of the problem of the analogy that I presented earlier was there's no solution for it. Right? This rising anxiety, this challenge, this existential challenge from everything that appears to have no meaning at all, this sort of universe that is devoid of this human touch, this love. It is this unconcerning, disinterested nature that confronts us. How are we going to provide meaning to it? How are we going to provide stability to it? We bring God into the picture. Now, I'm not trying to make an argument for the human invention of God. That's an entirely separate argument, philosophical argument. But even if something is invented, let's say, for example, the invention of the light bulb. Now, we could say that the light bulb was not real before it was invented, because it didn't exist. We still continue to say the same after we invented the light bulb. We have its physical form. We screwed it into a light socket that we've also produced. And we flowed electricity to it, and it has profound meaning and utility. Are we to say that that light bulb is false? That because it didn't exist before, it can never exist in the future? I don't think so. And so, in this way, it can be seen that we are discovering the light bulb. Because we are given everything, all the tools around us to design this light bulb. And in a sense, all we had to do through engineering was to find it. Within all the possibilities of all combinations of how things can be combined together, we found it to produce the light bulb. Now this finding, this engineering miracle, may not be the highest, which again gets into God's territory. And just like this way, if we have found the light bulb, we can find God. Our own hubris would suggest that God doesn't exist, even if it is an invention of the human mind, because inventions of the human mind are inherently the finding of all the probabilistic things of nature that improve our material condition, and we have found God. Of course, many of us today can no longer see it because of our material explanation of things and how void it is of love and understanding. It produces this sort of poverty of the human being, of the human mind. Now, of course, nothing I've said rejects any sort of material reality or even material explanation. It's part of this system. But it has to also be included in the broader form of thought that includes the whole of it. You have given the command to save me, for you are my rock and my fortress. Rescue me, O my God, from the hand of the wicked, from the grasp of the unjust and the cruel man. Now, there's something that has crossed my mind that is sort of an add-on to the previous thought. I heard a voice in my mind saying, what if I said to you that in the case of God, unlike the case of the light bulb, before you had a plan to find the light bulb, you put it through your method, and you have put it into, you brought this idea to the external or the material world. But in the case of God, all you've done is find the plan for it. But you have not found it exactly. Because where is it in our material world? And I think it's a good point. But I would say that my argument is that it does exist. We find it in love, as there are many. The Bible refers to God as love. We can also say the universe is evidence for it. Not in the sense that the divine is in everything, like a pantheistic explanation, but rather that the divine source is outside of the universe itself, because it is the creator of it. And so our very intelligibility and the mechanism is the proof. Now, unfortunately, it precedes scientific explanation, which is quite difficult, at least at our current understanding. I think if we are to move to the next level of consciousness, it would be at the realm of discovering the relationship between our universe and what's outside of it. Because once we've done that, we've increased our understanding, if it's right, of course. We have increased our understanding of man and nature to the creator of it, whatever that might look like. Now, if it is the case of this complete disinterested nothingness, where gases come together and it explodes out into this wondrous, violent explosion of natural phenomena that after billions upon billions of linear time, years of linear time, it comes to some sort of unity in the form of the conscious mind to completely, or to understand it, to bring light to it and to understand it. This is an elevation of consciousness of that system. And I think that, again, as I've said before, that once our relationship to the external system has moved to a new level, just as one's relationship with another person can move to a new level, it can go through various different periods of its existence. But once it's in a particular relationship of love and understanding, then I think humanity as a whole moves into a new culture, a new society, a new civilization, whatever we want to call it. But that's the next enlightenment when that happens. And it can be discovered by scientific means completely. I mean, I think this is one of the best tools that we have to think at this scale. And if we use that hammer, I think we can find some good philosophical understanding, existential understanding. But of course, to say that everything is completely bottom up and emergent is a bit of a stretch. We have to utilize humanity's intuition, their sense of being, and their sort of connectedness to the reality that they find themselves in. Because the fundamental psychological pathologies have been known about for many thousands of years. It's just put in different language, and we could talk about any number of things at all scales of reality, from one individual to a multitude of individuals, and how they come together and they form these identities of their own that interact with one another at a higher scale of consciousness, and forms of the sort of the collective consciousness, and what they do to one another. It's not an individual to an individual, it's a collective of individuals against a collective of individuals, and how this scales up. Or maybe that's too segmented in terms of categorization. In more general, the spirit of things as they flow through society. Anyway, enough of that rambling. I've gone off course. I have been as a portent to many, but you are my strong refuge. My mouth is filled with your praise, and with your glory all the day. Do not cast me off in time of old age. Forsake me not when my strength is spent, for my enemies speak concerning me. Those who watch for my life consult together and say, God has forsaken him. Pursue and seize him, for there is none to deliver him. And so we see the author of the psalm saying that he has been a portent, the sort of bringer of omens, a cautious omen, a portent to many. Perhaps warning of what awaits on the other side if one does not accept the truth, that does not orient themselves rightly, does not walk in the path of the upright. My mouth is filled with your praise, and with your glory all the day. Do not cast me off in the time of old age. Forsake me not when my strength is spent. For my enemies speak concerning me. Those who watch for my life consult together and say, God has forsaken him, pursue and seize him, for there is none to deliver him. And so we see here this recognition of one's own weakness, asking in times of frailty not to be abandoned. And days of frailty and uncertainty confront us all, whether it be the inevitability of death, the inevitability of the aging process. We will all be confronted by this existential question. And yet the thing to do when it comes is to remain steadfast, to stand in the face of it, do your best to make sense of it, pay attention, stay alert, learn from it, teach others. Don't let others say of you, God has forsaken him, pursue and seize him, for there is none to deliver him. Verse 12. O God, be not far from me. O my God, make haste and help me. May my accusers be put to shame and consumed. With scorn and disgrace they may be covered, who seek my hurt. But I will hope continually. I will praise you yet more and more. My mouth will tell you of your righteous acts, of your deeds of salvation all the day. With the mighty deeds of the Lord God I will come. I will remind them of your righteousness, yours alone. And so here again we see this faithfulness, the standing in the face of adversity. And the promise in verse 15, my mouth will tell of your righteous acts, of your deeds of salvation all the day, for their number is past my knowledge. With the mighty deeds of the Lord God I will come. I will remind them of your righteousness, yours alone. O God, from my youth you have taught me, and I still proclaim your wondrous deeds. So even to old age and gray hairs, O God, do not forsake me, until I proclaim your might to another generation, your power to all those who come. Your righteousness, O God, reaches the high heavens. You who have done great things, O God, who is like you, who have made me see many troubles and calamities, will revive me again from the depths of the earth, and you bring me up again. You will increase my greatness and comfort me again. And it's interesting, this sense of again. You who have made me see many troubles and calamities will revive me again. From the depths of the earth, you will bring me up again. You will increase my greatness and comfort me again. Almost as if it has happened before, and then something had happened between then in the time of writing this, a change in a certain condition. Certainly not the faithfulness. But it seems as though this author may have had an intense spiritual experience, perhaps. Or maybe a time in their life when they felt more connected. They recall the days of their youth when they've learned of God and from God. They ask not to be forsaken in old age. They promise to pass on what they've learned to future generations. This sounds like the voice of an older man. But this again, this revival, is a bit disconcerting. I wonder what he had in mind when he said that. It could be that he was at the front of his faithfulness, and his again was purely to reach another height, another level of thought, another level of being, to put his soul at rest, to continue his project. Or perhaps he's suffering, and he wishes to return to a previous state of being, a previous way of understanding. I will also praise you with the harp. For your faithfulness, O my God, I will sing praises to you with the lyre. O Holy One of Israel, my lips will shout for joy when I sing praises to you, my soul also, which you have redeemed. And my tongue will talk of your righteous help all the day long, for they have put to shame and disappointed, who sought to do me hurt. And again we return to the praise. We return to the promise of action, the promise of participation. Not only to engage in thought, to write the songs of praise, but to sing them as well. Psalm 72, the last psalm of the second book of the Psalms. It's titled, Give the King Your Justice, of Solomon. Give the king your justice, O God, and your righteousness to the royal son. May he judge your people with righteousness, and your poor with justice. Let the mountains bear prosperity for the people, and let the hills in righteousness. May he defend the cause of the poor of the people. Give deliverance to the children of the needy, and crush the oppressor. May they fear you while the sun endures, and as long as the moon throughout all generations. May he be like the rain that falls on the mown grass, like showers that water the earth. In his days may the righteous flourish, and peace abound, till the moon be no more. May he have domination from sea to sea, and from river to the ends of the earth. May desert tribes bow down before him, and his enemies lick the dust. May the kings of Tarshish and of the coastlands render him tribute. May the kings of Sheba and Seba bring gifts. May all kings fall down before him, all nations serve him. For he delivers the needy when he calls, the poor, and him who has no helper. He has pity on the weak and the needy, and saves the lives of the needy. From oppression and violence he redeems their life, and precious is their blood in his sight. Long may he live. May gold of Sheba be given to him. May prayer be made for him continually, and blessings invoked for him all the day. May there be abundance of grain in the land. On the tops of the mountain may it wave. May its fruits be like Lebanon, and may people blossom in the cities like the grass of the field. May his name endure forever, his fame continue as long as the sun. May people be blessed in him. All nations call him blessed. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who alone does wondrous things. Blessed be his glorious name forever. May the whole earth be filled with his glory. Amen and amen. The prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. Although this is not a new reflection, I think it's something that deserves to be mentioned every time. Words like in the first verse, give the king your justice, O God, and your righteousness to the royal son. We always have to remember that God is reluctant to have a king rule over Israel. However, there have been kings that sought the favor of God, and the favor of God given to them. And so for God to give justice to the king, for the king to judge God's people with righteousness, and the poor with justice, is to do right by them, is to understand their concerns, to guide them appropriately, not to bind them in debt and in interest, not to force them to work the lands, not to force them to remain in a state of slavery. But rather to be a shepherd to the flock, to lead this flock to prosperity, away from violence, from neighboring tribes, away from the darkness that the mind can retreat to when it has no grounding, when it doesn't understand what its purpose is, when it's confused about its environment, the environment that it doesn't understand, when it's disoriented by the strong winds and violence that surrounds it, that blows it about. Let the mountains bear prosperity for the people, and the hills and the righteousness. May he defend the cause of the poor of the people, give deliverance to the children of the needy, and crush the oppressor. Now, for one to defend the cause of the poor is to say that regardless of one's material condition, their place in society, the size of their house, their cause for life is just as sacrosanct as any. And due to the tendency of these downtrodden individuals. It is important that we understand that these people are given attention, that their cause is defended, because their cause can be easily forgotten in the hierarchy of things. We must take everybody with us if we are going to be led to the promised land. Give deliverance to children of the needy, because of those in need, they are in poverty as much in the physical realm as they are in the mental. And for a child to be born in a particular condition, which leads them to a dullness of mind and dullness of character, lacking a sense of righteousness and of justice, it's not necessarily their fault. And so we pray for them to be delivered, and for the oppressor that wishes to oppress them crushed. Now this next verse, verse 5, I find interesting. May they fear you while the sun endures, as long as the moon, throughout all generations. Now, if I imagine myself an ancient person, perhaps I live in the city, perhaps I live in a house outside of the city walls, tending to the sheep or tending to the farmland. Regardless of my condition, the scale of the society is not anywhere near it is today. And I think it offers certain affordances of being and of closeness to the earth, of closeness to danger. Everything, I'm sure, was much more present. This was before the day when our minds seemed to be sucked away from our bodies, tempted ever more into this dystopian duality of mind that ignores the body, of a population that just doesn't seem to consider the consequences of their actions. That chooses to accept their unfortunate condition as long as they have the appropriate medication, whether that be a fast food restaurant or a bottle of pills. We've been afforded much in our modern society. But there's nothing quite like the life on the edge of the farm, or within the walls of a city in an early civilization, surrounded by enemies, to keep one's perspective, to keep it tight and to keep it vigilant. May they fear you while the sun endures, as long as the moon throughout all generations. And so again, me, as this person in this city or on this farmland, I look up to the sun, I look up to the moon. And this is something that is forever unchanging. I imagine it to be a constant of the universe. And so I symbolize it as a state of matter that transcends me. The time of its existence extends beyond the generations of man. But just as this is the case, may they fear you, both the oppressors and the loyal followers, that in the absence of fear they may forget what it means to be judged according to the divine law. We should not mistake this fear for submission, but rather to accept the reality of our situation, the reality about this world that we've been thrust into. With this conscious mind, into the darkness. May he be like the rain that falls on the mown grass, like showers that water the earth. In his days, may the righteous flourish, and peace abound, till the moon be no more. And so may the man of God be like the rain, the grass that is mown is in a state of need, in some sense, in a place of the ability to accept the rain of man, to raise it from its downtrodden condition to the state of something greater, taller, more vibrant, greener. Like showers that water the earth. In his days may the righteous flourish, and peace abound, till the moon is no more. To the state of nature that have been reported by our fathers, and our fathers' fathers, and their fathers. May our righteousness, the righteousness of the people who follow the most upright of shepherds, may they outlast the moon. May his dominion cover the earth, from the river to the ends of the earth, from the place of the most sustainable habitation of man at the edge of the Euphrates, through the deserts, into the unknown, the ends of the earth. May the desert tribes bow down before him, and his enemies lick the dust. May the kings of Tarshish and of the coastlands render him tribute. May the kings of Sheba and Seba bring gifts. May all kings fall down before him. All nations serve him. And here we see a possibility of this hierarchical structure of human civilization. They wish that all of these kings to be the proper shepherds of their people. And the very proposition, may all kings fall down before him, and all nations serve him, it supposes that this is not always the case. An inherently corruptible institution, as every institution of man is. But it's a hope and the want that these nations and these kings will do what is right for the sake of all of us. For he delivers the needy when he calls, the poor and him who has no helper. He has pity on the weak and the needy, and saves the lives of the needy. From oppression and violence he redeems their life, and precious is their blood in his sight. Now these verses 12 through 14, I think, take on a new meaning today, at least in this nation, in the United States. In the ancient world, I think violence was much more at their doorstep. Oppression, potential slavery, was much more immediate. Starvation, certainly, was much more immediate. And so deliverance for these people is not as abstract. In a way, it's simpler. Deliverance of the modern man is difficult because of the mind that he's built for himself and the society that is testing his being, testing his relationship to his body, testing the fortitude of his mind against many competing factors that choose to divert his attention. And it's those that get lost in it, that get torn apart by it, that get run down by the ways of our modern society. It's these that are the poor, and it's these that will be delivered. It are these that he has pity on, because they are the weak and the needy. Long may he live. May gold of Sheba be given to him. May prayer be made of him continually, and blessings invoked for him all the day. May there be abundance of grain in the land. On the tops of the mountain may it wave. May its fruits be like Lebanon, and may people blossom in the cities like the grass of the field. May his name endure forever, his fame continue as long as the sun. May people bless in him. All nations call him blessed. And I'll read it again to finish it out, to finish this Book 2 of the Psalms. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who alone does wondrous things. Blessed be his glorious name forever. May the whole earth be filled with his glory. Amen and amen. The prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. And so we will stop here. We will continue next time with Book 3 of the Psalms. God is my strength and portion forever. Psalm 73, a psalm of Asaph.